Hello, this is a video on how to play the card game Chase the Ace, or it's also known as Pass the Ace. It's a very simple card game, and so what you'll need is a 52 card deck, and you'll need 5 or more players, and so the game doesn't really work. Like the less players you have, the less fun the game is. And so you actually want 5 or more players for the game to run smoothly. And so you'll need some sort of marker, or I guess some people like to use tokens for each player. And these signify the lives of the player. And so here you can see that each player has 3 hearts. And so these 3 hearts are showing the 3 lives of each player. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players playing here. And the more players, the better. And so the rank of the cards is from highest to lowest. King is the highest. So from highest to lowest, king's the highest and ace is the lowest. So it's ace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each player is given 3 lives. Each player draws 1 card. The player with the highest card is the first dealer. And so I'm the dealer in this case. I guess I don't really know who the dealer is. Let's just start the game and find out. And so it seems that the player across from us is the dealer. Now, remember that the ace is always the lowest in Chase the Ace or Pass the Ace. And so you want to remember to always pass the ace. And so once again, you need 52 cards, 5 or more players. From highest to lowest, it's king to ace. Each player is dealt 1 card to start the game. The objective of the game is to avoid having the lowest ranking card at the end of each round. Otherwise, you will lose a life. And so the player to the left of the dealer is first to play. And so if you noticed, the player on our top right, at the 2 o'clock position, was the first player to play. During a turn, players can decide to keep their current card or exchange cards with the player on the left. If a player decides to exchange, the player on the left must exchange unless he or she is holding a king. And so, remember, the objective of the game is to avoid having the lowest ranking card at the end of a round. And we know that 3 is quite low ranking. And so I don't want to keep a 3, and so I'm going to click pass. I passed it with the player on my left. Notice what happened there. So let's just sort of talk about what just happened right here. So if a player decides to exchange, the player on the left must exchange unless he or she is holding a king. And so I said, hey, 3 is quite low. I don't want to hold a 3 because if I hold the lowest ranking card at the end of the round, I'm going to lose a life. And so I swapped it with the player on my left. And since he did not have a king, he must give me his card. And so if the dealer wants to, and so you must exchange your card unless you're holding a king. And so notice how the player currently holding the 3 tried to pass their card with the person on the left. If a player has a king and is asked to exchange, no exchange occurs and the king is flipped up. And that's what you saw there. The king was flipped up because the player to 3's left had a king. The player holding 3, the player to his left had a king. He did not exchange it. You cannot exchange a king. And so he flipped it up, and that player essentially at the 9 o'clock position, the player at the 9 o'clock position was stuck with his low 3. And so if a player has a king and is asked to exchange, no exchange occurs, and the king is flipped up. The dealer, well, he can't really exchange with anybody because he was essentially the first player. I guess the first one to really, start the round. And so the dealer exchanges from the deck. They either keep their card or draw the top card from the deck. A dealer cannot exchange for a king from the deck. If the king is the top card in the center deck, the dealer is stuck with his/her original card. If two players tie for the lowest ranking card in a round, they both lose a token. And so let's play another round. What is the objective of the game? Let's sum it up again. Each player has one card. The objective of the game is to avoid having the lowest ranking card at the end of a round. Otherwise, you lose a token. The player left of the dealer is the first to play. During a turn, players can decide to keep their current card or exchange cards with the player on their left. If a player decides to exchange, the player on the left must exchange unless he or she is holding a king. If the player on your left is holding a king, the exchange does not occur and the player is stuck with their current card. The player with the king flips up their king. The dealer exchanges their card with the top card of the draw pile in the middle. If the top card in the draw pile in the middle is a king, the dealer is stuck with his or her card. So essentially, you look at your card, you say, hey, is there a good chance that this will be the lowest ranking card in the round? If yes, I want to exchange it. If I have a high ranking card, I do not want to exchange it. You exchange with the player on your left unless they have a king, in which case you are stuck. The dealer exchanges with the card in the middle, unless the card in the middle is a king, in which case the dealer is stuck with their card. And that is the essence of the game. So let's play another round. I have a queen. I'm going to keep the queen because the queen is quite high. Remember, it doesn't matter if you're not the highest, you just don't want to be the lowest in a round. I know that there's no way the queen is going to be the lowest in the round, and so I'm going to keep. The dealer keeps. The person with the ace, remember, you always want to pass the ace. And so the person with the ace loses a life because they had the lowest ranking card. We play again. I will pass. The player to my left had a king. If a player has a king and is asked to exchange, no exchange occurs, and the king is flipped up. Notice how that player had the ace. The ace was the lowest ranking card, and so they lose a life. And so we will just keep playing here, and I hope you can sort of see what is going on here. Now, I had the lowest ranking card there. I had the ace, and so I was forced to lose a life. I believe I might have accidentally clicked keep there, and so that's my bad. But I drew a king. Notice what just happened there. These two players had the lowest ranking card. It was a 6. If two players tie for the lowest ranking card in a round, they both lose a life. Always pass the ace. Always pass the ace. This player had a 5. Jack is greater than 5. 10 is greater than 5. 6 is greater than 5. 6 is greater than 5. Jack is greater than 5. Queen is greater than 5. And Jack is greater than 5. Therefore, he had the lowest ranking card, and he loses a life. We'll keep the 10 because 10 is quite a high ranking card. Once a player loses all their lives, he or she is out of the game. Notice that player was out of the game. And so I think you can sort of just see what the game is. You don't want to have the lowest ranking card. If you have a low ranking card, you want to pass, but you cannot exchange for a king. Those are basically the 3 summary bullet points. The player with the lowest ranking card loses a life. We're going to keep the Jack because the Jack is quite high ranking. The player with a 7 lost a life now. A 2 is quite low, and so we will pass. The player with the ace loses a life. A 2 is quite low ranking, and so we will pass. Now a 5 is quite low ranking, so I'm not feeling too confident about this round. However, the player with the 2 lost their lives. Once a player loses all of their lives, they are out of the game. It's not like some games where you lose all your lives and then you have one more shot to remain in the game. No. If you lose all your lives, you're out of the game. You don't get an extra chance with 0 lives to play. 6 is quite low, I believe, and so I will pass. It was a good risk because a 10 is higher. The dealer will draw. In this case, the 6 was the lowest ranking card, and so he loses a life. I will keep the 10, as the 10 is quite a high ranking card. Once a player loses all their lives, they are out of the game. That player just lost his last life, so he is out of the game. A 4 is quite low ranking, so I will pass it. I'm not feeling too confident, and so I lost a life. I will pass the 3 because it is quite low ranking. However, notice the bad strategy I had there. Now we're going to talk about 2 things here. Number 1, once again, as a reminder, if 2 players tie for the lowest ranking card in a round, they both lose a token. But notice what just happened there. That player took my ace and gave me his 3. And since he just passed, he can do no other maneuver. I know that he just gave me a 3 and he just took my ace. So his card I know is guaranteed lower than mine. So I could have kept that 3 and I would have been completely fine. Because I know that he had an ace. Once he passed it with me and he took my ace, I saw that he took my ace. He took a lower value card. And I knew that the 3 he gave me is higher than the ace he took from me. Therefore, he has a guaranteed lower value card than me. That means that I'm not the player with the lowest value card in the round. And so I could have kept that 3 and I would have been completely safe. And so just keep track of that. If a player takes a card from you and gives you a higher value card, you can keep that card because you know the player that just took the card from you now has the lower value card. So a 2 is quite low, and so we will pass. We get a 9. A 9 is quite high value, and so I'm quite comfortable with this card. Once a player loses all of their lives, they are out of the game. In that instance, that player lost all of their lives, and so they were out of the game. I'm going to draw. I had the lowest value card, and so I was out of the game. And so in this case, it's telling us to end the game. Now that was a quick demo of how to play Chase the Ace or Pass the Ace. It's quite a simple game. Once again, you will need a 52 card deck with 5 or more players. The more players, the funner the game. Notice that each player only has 1 card, and so you could have a very large number of players. You could have 30, 40 players. The more players, the better. Each player is given 3 items, I guess if you're playing in real life, to represent the player's 3 lives. Each player draws 1 card. The ace is always the lowest and chase the ace or pass the ace. Each player is dealt 1 card. The objective of the game is to avoid having the lowest ranking card at the end of each round. Otherwise, you will lose a token. The round is completed when the dealer completes their move. The player left of the dealer is the first to play in each round. During a turn, players can decide to keep their current card or exchange cards with the player on their left. If a player decides to exchange, the player on the left must exchange unless he or she is holding a king. If the dealer wants to exchange his/her card, he or she will draw the top card of the discard pile. After each player has had a turn, the cards are flipped up. The player with the lowest ranking card loses a token. The last player with tokens wins the game. Players must exchange their cards when requested, except if holding a king. If a player has a king and is asked to exchange, no exchange occurs, and the king is flipped up. A dealer cannot exchange for a king from the deck. If a king is a top card in the deck, in the middle pile, the dealer is stuck with his/her original card. If two players tie for the lowest ranking card in a round, they both lose a life. Once a player is out of lives, he or she is out of the game. If two players are left, now this is a last rare instant rule. If two players are left in the game and tie, neither player loses a token, because you can't have two, you wouldn't have a winner then, right? If two players are left in the game and tie, neither player loses a token. So normally if two players tie for the lowest value card in a round, they both lose a life. But if you only have two players left in the game and they both tie, you redraw the round. That wraps up how to play Chase the Ace or Pass the Ace. It's quite a simple card game, but I feel like it's quite a fun card game as well. And remember, the more people you have, the better. You know what's beautiful about this game? There's no limit on the number of players you have. And so sometimes you have other games where one person is left out because there's a limit.